At 10:35 a.m., my phone rang in front of everyone. I was standing in the office break room holding a paper cup of burnt coffee when two officers stepped through the glass doors. Conversations slowed. Keyboards stopped clicking. Someone whispered my name. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." No explanation. No privacy. My manager avoided my eyes. My coworkers stared like they were watching a scene unfold on television. Just 5 hours earlier, my neighbor had banged on my door at 4 a.m. "Don't leave for work today. Just trust me." I had asked why. He looked shaken. "You'll know by noon." Now the officers were here. And I realized something terrifying. He wasn't guessing. He knew they didn't put handcuffs on me. That almost made it worse. The officers were calm, professional, too careful. "We just need to ask you a few questions," one of them said, in front of my entire department. My manager stood near the copier, arms folded, lips pressed tight. He didn't ask if I needed a lawyer. He didn't ask what was happening. He just watched. Have you ever felt someone step back from you the second it becomes inconvenient to stand beside you? In the patrol car, I tried to piece together what could possibly justify this. Parking violation? Identity theft? Some administrative mix-up? The station smelled like stale air and old paperwork. They led me into a small interview room with gray walls and a metal table bolted to the floor. "Do you recognize these transactions?" The detective asked, sliding printed bank statements across the table. They were from the company's internal account. My department's budget, large sums, repeated transfers, all authorized under my login credentials. I stared at the page. "That's not possible," I said quietly. "I don't even have access to that tier." The detective didn't argue. He just observed me. "When did you last log into the system?" he asked. "Yesterday afternoon," I replied. I thought about my routine. Arrive at 8:15, coffee from the corner cafe, log into payroll system, review compliance reports. Same pattern every weekday for 3 years. Predictable, reliable, safe. Or so I believed. My mind drifted back to 4 a.m., the pounding on my door, my neighbor's pale face under the porch light. "You'll know by noon." How could he have known about internal financial transfers? Unless this wasn't random. Unless someone had already decided I would be the easiest person to blame. Back at the station, the detective leaned forward slightly. "Your manager flagged irregularities yesterday," he said. "He reported them first thing this morning." First thing this morning. Before I even arrived at work. Before the officers walked into the break room. A quiet betrayal. No conversation. No internal review. No chance to defend myself. Just a report. Have you ever realized you were already being positioned as the fall person before you even knew something was wrong? "I didn't move that money," I said, steady but firm. "Check access logs. IP addresses. You'll see it." He studied my face. "We're checking everything," he said. "You're not under arrest, but we need you available." Available. That word settled heavily. Because even if I was innocent, the damage had already started. By the time I left the station, my phone had several missed calls. Not from friends, from HR, from my manager, from an unknown number. I sat in my car in the parking lot and stared at the steering wheel. The sun was high now. Ordinary. Unbothered. At 4 a.m., my neighbor told me not to go to work. If I had stayed home, what would have happened? Would they have said I was avoiding questioning? Would that have made it worse? Or had he been trying to protect me from something else entirely? As I drove home, I noticed my neighbor's curtains were closed. No movement. No sign he had ever knocked at my door. And that unsettled me more than the police station. Because if he knew something that specific, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was preparation. I didn't go back to the office that afternoon. HR sent a short email. Administrative leave pending investigation. Clean. Neutral. Cold. No one asked how I was. No one said they believed me. 3 years of consistency erased by a single morning headline inside a conference room. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop, replaying the detective's words. Your manager flagged irregularities first thing this morning. First thing? Before 9 a.m. Before I even arrived. Have you ever felt like the story about you had already been written without your input? I opened my email history and started scanning for anything unusual. Nothing obvious. Just routine approvals, compliance memos, internal audits. Then I remembered something small. 2 weeks ago, my manager had asked me to stay late. Just help me reconcile a few discrepancies, he said. We sat in his office under fluorescent light while he accessed restricted files using his credentials. He dictated numbers. I entered them into a shared sheet. I never questioned it. Why would I? He outranked me. Authority makes things feel legitimate. Looking back, I remember one moment clearly. He asked for my login to double-check formatting. I hesitated for half a second. He smiled. I trust you. You trust me, right? I handed over the keyboard. At the time, it felt harmless. Now it felt staged. Have you ever ignored a small discomfort because you didn't want to appear difficult? That night, around 7 p.m., someone knocked again. Not urgent this time. Measured. I opened the door slowly. My neighbor stood there, hands in his jacket pockets. He looked exhausted. You talked to them, he said quietly. Yes, I replied. You knew something. He exhaled. I work night security at the building next to yours, he said. I saw 2 of your coworkers dumping shredded documents into the commercial bins at 3 a.m. My stomach tightened. They were arguing, he continued. I heard your name. I leaned against the doorframe to steady myself. Why didn't you call the police? I asked. He looked down briefly. Because I didn't know the full picture. I just knew you shouldn't be there when whatever was coming happened. So he wasn't protecting me from arrest. He was protecting me from being present when they finalized the narrative. Have you ever realized someone else saw danger circling you before you did? What exactly did you hear? I pressed. Your manager said she won't see it coming. She never questions anything. The words landed harder than the police interrogation. She never questions anything. That wasn't just an assumption. That was strategy. I felt something shift inside me. Not panic, not anger, clarity. This wasn't about money alone. It was about convenience. I was predictable, reliable, quiet, perfect to frame. Why tell me? I asked softly. My neighbor hesitated. Because my wife went through something similar years ago, he said, and no one warned her. Silence stretched between us. I realized then that this wasn't random betrayal. It was layered. Manager, coworkers, timing. And if they had prepared this carefully, they assumed one thing. That I would panic. That I would fold. That I would accept suspension quietly and hope it passed. But sitting there in my doorway, I felt something steady forming. For years, I had avoided conflict to keep peace. Now peace had been taken from me anyway. What else had I ignored in the name of staying agreeable? I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, because I was thinking. Patterns reveal themselves when you step back from emotion. At 4 a.m., he warned me. At 9 a.m., my manager reported irregularities. At 10:35 a.m., police arrived. The timeline wasn't sloppy. It was precise. Which meant this had been building for longer than a day. I opened my laptop again and began reviewing system access logs from my own records. I didn't have clearance for full audit trails, but I could see timestamps tied to my login. There were entries logged at 2:14 a.m. I was asleep at 2:14 a.m. Have you ever felt the ground shift when proof quietly confirms what you feared? I zoomed in on the IP address attached to the transaction. Internal network. Same subnet used by executive offices. My manager's floor. The pieces weren't dramatic. They were technical, boring, precise, which made them believable. I remembered another small moment from last month. He had started excluding me from certain meetings. Just high-level stuff, he said casually. Nothing you need to worry about. At the time, I felt relieved. Less pressure, fewer responsibilities. Now it looked different. Isolation, preparation, remove me from oversight before moving money, frame me with access credentials, report first to appear proactive. Have you ever realized someone was building a case against you while smiling across a desk? The more I reviewed, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't desperation. It was strategy. He knew I avoided confrontation. He knew I preferred harmony over suspicion. He counted on my silence. And if I had gone to work that morning without warning, I would have walked straight into their narrative. The break room whispers, the officers, the humiliation, all designed to make me look shocked and guilty at the same time. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. They didn't just want the money, they wanted credibility. And I was the easiest person to sacrifice. But they had made one miscalculation. They assumed I would stay passive. And I wasn't going to. Because once you see the pattern clearly, you can't unsee it. The next morning, I didn't call my manager. I didn't defend myself in long emotional emails. I documented. Quietly. Have you ever noticed how panic is exactly what the other side expects? I started with screenshots, login timestamps, IP addresses, archived emails where he requested my credentials under the excuse of formatting fixes. I wrote down dates from memory before they could blur. Then I called the detective directly. I need to add something to my statement, I said calmly. We met again that afternoon. The same gray room, the same metal table. But this time, I wasn't just answering questions. I slid printed logs across to him. These entries happened while I was home, I explained. You can confirm my location from phone tower data if needed. He didn't interrupt. I continued. My manager requested my credentials weeks ago. You'll find that in email records. There's something powerful about speaking without defensiveness. It changes the temperature in the room. He leaned back slightly. You're saying this was staged? He said. I'm saying the timeline doesn't work unless someone else used my access. Silence. Have you ever felt the moment when suspicion shifts away from you? He nodded once. We'll expand the scope. Expand the scope. That was all I needed. I didn't go home feeling victorious, just steadier. Because now it wasn't just my word against theirs. It was data. That evening, my manager called. I hear you're trying to complicate things, he said, tone controlled. Complicate. As if defending myself were inconvenient. I'm clarifying things, I replied. You don't want to drag this out, he warned gently. It won't look good. There it was. Subtle pressure. The suggestion that quiet resignation would be easier. Have you ever been encouraged to accept blame for the sake of convenience? I didn't take anything, I said evenly, and I won't act like I did. A pause. You're making a mistake, he said softly. No, I answered. You did. I hung up before he could recalibrate. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from boundary. For years, I avoided confrontation to keep peace at work. Stayed agreeable, avoided questioning authority. That version of me would have apologized just to end discomfort. But something had shifted. When you've already been humiliated publicly, what else is there to lose? The following week, police requested access logs from the executive server. And suddenly, HR stopped emailing. Well, my manager stopped calling. The building felt quieter. Too quiet. That's when I understood something else. They weren't confident anymore. They were calculating exit strategies. And once the power dynamic starts shifting, it doesn't return to what it was. Because I wasn't defending my innocence anymore. I was exposing their strategy. 3 days later, the detective called again. We need you to come in, he said. His tone was different this time. Not cautious, focused. At the station, they didn't lead me to the small gray interview room. They took me to a larger office with 2 desks and a window that let in actual sunlight. My manager was already there. He wasn't in handcuffs, but he wasn't comfortable either. He avoided my eyes. The detective placed a printed sheet on the desk between us. Server logs, executive credentials, time-stamped access from his private terminal at 2:11 a.m., 3 minutes before the transactions under my login were triggered. Have you ever watched someone's composure fracture in slow motion? This doesn't prove anything, my manager said quickly. The detective didn't respond. He slid over another document. Security footage from the building's executive floor. Him entering at 1:58 a.m. alone. He swallowed. You gave me your login, he said, looking at me now. You're responsible for safeguarding it. There it was. The last attempt. Shift blame. Dilute accountability. Yes, I said calmly. And you asked for it under supervision during business hours, not at 2 a.m. Silence. The detective leaned forward. You reported irregularities before reviewing system footage, he said to my manager. Why? No answer. Have you ever realized someone underestimated your willingness to fight back? The narrative was collapsing, piece by piece. My manager exhaled sharply. It was temporary, he muttered. I was going to fix it before audit. Temporary, a word people use when they mean calculated. You transferred company funds into a shell account, the detective replied evenly, under her credentials. The room felt smaller, not suffocating, just exposed. For weeks, maybe months, he had built this, counting on my predictability, my silence, my reluctance to challenge authority. He never expected me to document, to question, to push back. And that was his miscalculation. When the detective finally dismissed me, I stood without looking at my manager again. Not out of hatred, out of closure. Because what he broke wasn't just trust. It was my illusion that being agreeable keeps you safe. As I stepped outside, the air felt different, clearer. For the first time since 4 a.m., my chest felt steady. But something inside me had changed permanently. Because once you learn how easily you can be positioned as disposable, you stop making yourself small. I didn't go back to work right away. Even after the charges were filed. Even after HR sent an official apology email filled with words like miscommunication and regret. Have you ever noticed how institutions apologize without admitting what they allowed? They reinstated me, offered back pay, promised internal review procedures. But something in me had already stepped away. For years, I believed safety came from staying agreeable, from not challenging authority, from trusting that competence would protect me. It didn't. What protected me was documentation, boundaries, and a neighbor who chose to knock at 4 a.m. I met him on the sidewalk a few days later. The sky was pale with early evening light. You were right, I told him. He shrugged lightly. You handled it. No dramatic speeches, no hero moment, just quiet acknowledgement. That felt appropriate. I submitted my resignation the following week. Not impulsively, not emotionally, deliberately. Have you ever realized that walking away can be more powerful than staying to prove something? They offered a promotion to keep me. Title, salary increase, new department. I declined, because the version of me who needed their validation had already dissolved. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear about what I deserved, clear about how easily systems sacrifice individuals, clear about who I wanted to be moving forward. When I packed my desk, no one avoided my eyes this time. Some even apologized quietly, but I didn't need apologies. I needed alignment. And alignment meant choosing environments where silence isn't mistaken for weakness, where trust isn't exploited, where authority doesn't equal immunity. As I carried the final box to my car, I felt something steady settle inside me. Not revenge. Resilience. Because this wasn't just about proving innocence. It was about redefining my boundaries. A month later, the detective called again. Not about updates, about closure. My manager had been formally charged. 2 other employees were under investigation for complicity. Internal audits uncovered months of manipulation. It unraveled faster than we expected, the detective said. It usually does. Once one thread pulls loose, the rest follow. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat quietly in my new home office, sunlight spilling across the desk. No fluorescent buzz, no whispering coworkers, just steady afternoon light and the hum of my laptop. I had accepted a role at a smaller firm. Transparent leadership, shared access logs, no single point of unchecked authority. During my first team meeting, the director said something simple. If something feels off, question it, even if it's me. I felt that sentence settle deep. Have you ever realized how different it feels to work somewhere that expects you to speak? I still think about 4 a.m. The knocking, the porch light flickering on, my neighbor's shaken voice. If he hadn't warned me, I would have walked straight into humiliation without context. I might have doubted myself longer, maybe even believed part of it was my fault. Instead, I learned something sharper. Staying agreeable doesn't guarantee safety. Silence doesn't equal loyalty. And trust should never replace verification. I don't see my old manager as an enemy anymore, just as someone who underestimated the person he tried to position as disposable. And that underestimation changed my trajectory, not because I sought revenge, but because I refused to shrink. If this resonates with you, take it as permission to document, to question, to protect yourself quietly. Sometimes the 4 a.m. knock isn't a threat, it's a warning. What would you have done if someone told you not to show up that day? Comment below.